The Deep Space Radar Station on Moon Base Alpha was having another quiet day. That was until every single detection system suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree. Officer Mike Jones nearly spilled his coffee as warning bells rang through the small monitoring room. "Sir, multiple objects just appeared at the edge of our solar system," Mike shouted to his supervisor, Captain James Walker, who rushed over to the main screen. The radar showed hundreds of massive objects, far bigger than anything humans had ever built, materializing just beyond Neptune's orbit. Captain Walker's 20 years of space monitoring experience hadn't prepared him for this moment. His hands trembled slightly as he pressed the direct line to Earth Defense Command. "This is Moon Base Alpha. We have a code black situation. I repeat, code black." Within minutes, every space agency and military command center on Earth was awake and active. Telescopes around the world turned toward the mysterious objects. The images they captured left everyone speechless. A fleet of ships, clearly not human-made, their metallic hulls reflecting the distant sunlight. "Those ships, their damage," observed Walker, studying the high-resolution images. Long scorch marks ran across their hulls, and some vessels seemed to be drifting slightly off-axis. Whatever these ships had been through, it hadn't been pleasant. The next 3 hours were the longest of Walker's career. Earth's military forces went on high alert, and emergency meetings were called in every major capital. Then, just as tension reached its peak, the aliens made first contact. The message came through on multiple frequencies, broadcasting in various mathematical patterns that Earth's computers quickly decoded into basic audio signals. The voice that emerged was artificial but clear. "To the inhabitants of the third planet, we come seeking assistance. Our fleet is damaged. We mean no harm. Please respond." The United Earth Space Command chose Captain Walker to send humanity's first reply, given his position as the first to spot the arrivals. His message was simple: "This is Earth. We receive you. How can we help?" The response came faster this time. The alien ships had begun moving closer, though still keeping a respectful distance near Jupiter's orbit. Their next transmission included visual data, and for the first time, humans saw what their visitors looked like. The aliens called themselves the Stellar Nomads. They appeared as tall, slender beings with silvery skin that seemed to shimmer like liquid metal. Their large eyes were adapted to the darkness of space, and their movements were graceful despite the obvious signs of stress they were under. "Our fleet carries 2 million of our people," their spokesperson explained, their words now translated through a rapidly improving communication system. "We fled from a disaster in our home system. Our main drive systems are critically damaged. We detected your world's level of technology and hoped you might assist us." Walker found himself fascinated by the aliens' directness. They weren't trying to hide their vulnerability, which either meant they were truly desperate or had enough remaining power to defend themselves if Earth proved hostile. He suspected it was both. "We have the authority to begin preliminary discussions," Walker replied, following his new orders from command. "But we'll need more details about your situation to determine how we can help." The alien spokesperson's expression changed in a way that Walker would later learn indicated relief. "We understand. We are grateful for any assistance you can provide. Our remaining power systems are failing. Without repairs, we estimate our life support systems will begin to fail within 3 months." As Walker relayed this information to Earth Command, he couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and concern. Humanity had just made first contact with an advanced alien civilization, but instead of coming to conquer or enlighten humanity, they had come asking for help. The next few hours were filled with careful diplomatic exchanges. The aliens provided basic technical data about their ships, and Earth scientists were already poring over it. Walker remained at his post, coordinating communications between Earth and the alien fleet. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of humanity's greatest engineering challenge, one that would prove that sometimes the simplest solutions could solve the most advanced problems. 3 days after first contact, The United Earth Space Command arranged the first face-to-face meeting with the stellar nomads. They chose the International Space Station as the meeting point, marking the first time aliens would board a human structure. Captain Walker stood nervously beside Dr. Ann Miller, Earth's leading expert in power systems, as the airlock cycled. The alien ship had matched the station's orbit perfectly, showing remarkable control despite their damaged systems. When the inner door opened, two stellar nomads ducked through the entrance. In person, they were even more striking than in transmissions, nearly 7 feet tall, with their silvery skin giving off a faint glow under the station's lights. The lead alien introduced himself as Navigator First Class Bright Star, while his companion was Technical Chief Morning Light. "Thank you for meeting with us," Bright Star said through a small translation device. "Time grows short, and our situation is worse than initially reported." Dr. Miller stepped forward, tablet in hand. "Please, tell us everything. We can't help if we don't understand the full scope of the problem." The aliens shared a look that seemed concerned, even through their foreign features. Morning Light activated a holographic display from a device on his wrist, showing detailed schematics of their ships. "Our fleet consists of 300 vessels," Morning Light explained, "each powered by quantum drive cores that tap into zero-point energy. 3 months ago, we encountered an unknown phenomenon in space, a wave of energy that corrupted our core programming. We barely managed to escape using emergency protocols." The hologram showed the massive ship's internal systems. Dr. Miller's eyes widened as she took in the complexity of their technology. It was like showing a steam engine engineer a nuclear reactor. "The corruption is spreading," Bright Star continued. "Our cores are linked in a network. What affects one eventually affects all. We've lost 60% of our power generation capacity. Life support systems are failing. We have families aboard, children." His voice trembled slightly before he regained composure. Walker asked the obvious question: "Why come to us? Surely there are other advanced civilizations who could better understand your technology." Morning Light's expression shifted to what they would later learn was embarrassment. "We passed several developed worlds, yes, but all of them rely on technology similar to ours. They would face the same corruption issues. Your world, your technology is different. Simpler, but perhaps that is what we need." Dr. Miller was already making calculations on her tablet. "You're saying you have 2 million people spread across 300 ships, all running on failing power systems that we barely understand, and we have 3 months to fix it." "Less," Bright Star corrected. "Some ships are failing faster than others. The largest colony vessels, carrying the most civilians, will lose life support in just over 2 months." The gravity of the situation hit everyone in the room. This wasn't just a technical problem. It was a humanitarian crisis on an interstellar scale. 2 million lives hung in the balance. "There's more," Morning Light added, adjusting his holographic display. "We detected signs that the energy wave that damaged us is moving through space. If a solution isn't found, your world could face the same danger in a few centuries." Walker watched Dr. Miller's face as she studied the alien schematics. He expected to see hopelessness. After all, how could humans possibly help with technology so far beyond their understanding? Instead, he saw something else: determination. "Your systems are incredibly advanced," she said slowly, "but they're also incredibly interdependent. Everything relies on everything else. We humans," she smiled slightly, "we tend to build things differently." The aliens looked at each other, then back at her. "Different how?" Bright Star asked. "We build in redundancies, backups, alternative systems. When something breaks, we find a way to work around it. It's not pretty, but it works." She pointed to various parts of their schematic. "Your technology is like a perfect diamond, beautiful but rigid. Ours is more like, well, duct tape and wire. But sometimes that's exactly what you need." For the first time since the meeting began, a flicker of hope appeared in the aliens' luminescent eyes. They didn't fully understand the human concept of duct tape, but they understood the look of confidence on Dr. Miller's face. The real work was about to begin. The main conference room at NASA's Johnson Space Center was packed with the brightest minds Earth had to offer. Engineers from every space agency sat shoulder to shoulder with stellar nomad technical experts, all gathered around a massive holographic display of the alien fleet's power systems. Dr. Miller stood at the front of the room, pointing at the complex network of quantum cores. "The problem isn't just that the cores are failing," she explained. "It's that they're all connected. Like dominoes. When one falls, it affects all the others." Tom Richards, a veteran engineer known for fixing impossible problems, raised his hand. "What if we don't try to fix the quantum cores at all?" The room fell silent. Even the aliens turned their silvery heads to stare at him. "Explain," said Morning Light, who had been appointed as the lead alien technical advisor. Tom walked to the front of the room, his worn work boots squeaking on the polished floor. "Look, we're thinking about this all wrong. We're trying to understand and fix technology that's centuries ahead of us. We won't solve this puzzle in time." He grabbed a marker and started drawing on the whiteboard. "But what we do know is power generation. Different methods, backup systems, emergency protocols. We're really good at keeping things running with whatever we have on hand." His marker squeaked as he sketched a simple diagram. "What if instead of trying to fix their advanced systems, we replace them with our own?" Morning Light's translator crackled as he spoke quickly. "Impossible. Your technology is too primitive. Our ships require massive amounts of power." "Primitive doesn't mean ineffective." Dr. Miller jumped in, catching on to Tom's idea. "We might not have quantum cores, but we have nuclear fusion reactors. They're reliable, we understand them completely, and most importantly, they're independent of each other." The next few hours turned into a heated but productive debate. The human engineers proposed a radical plan. Adapt Earth's fusion reactor technology to power the alien ships. It wasn't elegant, but it might work. "Think of it like this," Tom explained to the skeptical aliens. "Your ships are like a fancy electric car with a damaged battery. We're suggesting replacing it with a bunch of regular car batteries connected together. Not as efficient, but it'll get you moving again." The breakthrough came when young engineer Bill Cooper made a surprising discovery. He had been studying the alien power distribution systems and found something interesting. "Their power grid isn't that different from ours," he announced excitedly. "The principles are the same. It's just the source that's different. We don't need to rebuild their entire system, just the power generation." Morning Light and his team huddled together, discussing rapidly in their own language. The humans waited anxiously. Finally, they turned back to the group. "Your solution is inelegant," Morning Light said carefully, "but our simulations suggest it could work. The human fusion reactors, while less advanced, could provide enough power to maintain life support and basic systems." Dr. Miller smiled. "Sometimes the best solutions are the simple ones. We can't get you back to full power, but we can keep your people alive. That's what matters most, right?" The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Teams were assembled, resources were allocated, and a test protocol was developed. They would start with a small scout ship, less risk if something went wrong. Captain Walker, who had been quietly observing from the back of the room, couldn't help but feel proud. Here were humans, solving a problem that even advanced alien civilizations couldn't tackle, not because they were smarter or more advanced, but because they thought differently. "There's one more thing," Tom added, pulling out something from his toolkit. "We'll need a lot of these." He held up a roll of duct tape. The aliens stared in confusion at the silvery roll, their translation devices struggling to find an equivalent term. Dr. Miller laughed. "Trust me," she said, "this stuff has saved more missions than you'd believe." As the teams began to break up into smaller working groups, there was a new energy in the room. They had a plan. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't elegant, but it was uniquely human. And sometimes, that's exactly what's needed to solve an alien problem. The next week passed in a blur of activity. The International Space Station became the command center for what they called Project Lifeline. Huge cargo ships launched daily from Earth, carrying fusion reactor parts, cables, and yes, countless rolls of duct tape. Tom Richards and Dr. Miller sat in the station's observation module, surrounded by floating tablets and paper diagrams. They were finalizing the modification plans for the test ship, a small stellar nomad scout vessel about the size of a Boeing 747. The tricky part isn't installing the reactor, Tom said, pointing to his drawings. It's connecting it to their power grid without frying everything. He took a sip from his coffee pouch, dark circles under his eyes showing how little he'd slept. Bill Cooper floated into the module, carrying a new set of readings from the scout ship. Their power systems run on completely different frequencies than ours, he reported. It's like trying to plug an American appliance into a European socket, but 1,000,000 times more complicated. Morning Light entered the module next, his tall frame barely clearing the doorway. The alien engineer had been working closely with the human team, learning to appreciate their unconventional methods. We have completed the power grid isolation on the test ship, Morning Light announced. All connections to the quantum core network have been severed. We are ready to begin the reactor installation. Dr. Miller nodded, pulling up the final checklist on her tablet. Okay, let's go through this step by step. We get one shot at this. If we blow up the test ship, we'll lose the trust of the entire fleet. The plan was both simple and incredibly complex. They would install a modified fusion reactor in the scout ship's cargo bay. The reactor was smaller than normal but more powerful, using new designs that Earth's engineers had developed specifically for this project. The reactor goes here. Tom pointed to a large space in the holographic ship diagram. We're using the new magnetic containment field design. Bill's team figured out how to match the power output frequency to their systems. Morning Light studied the diagram. The power levels are much lower than our quantum cores produced, he noted, but sufficient for life support and basic operations. That's phase 1, Dr. Miller explained. Once we prove it works, we scale up. The bigger ships will need multiple reactors working together. We'll have to literally build mini power plants inside each colony ship. The team moved to the airlock, preparing to board the scout ship. Earth's first fusion reactor designed for alien technology waited in the cargo bay, ready for installation. Engineers from both species worked side by side, double-checking every connection. Captain Walker's voice came over the radio. All teams, this is command. Weather satellites show a solar flare approaching. We have 8 hours before we need to suspend operations. Whatever you're going to do it now. Tom looked at his team. No pressure, right? He tried to smile, but everyone could see the tension in his face. They were about to either save or destroy their first alien ship. The next few hours were intense. Human engineers in spacesuits worked alongside the more naturally space-adapted stellar nomads. They installed the reactor, connected the power converters, and ran hundreds of tests on every system. Bill's voice crackled over the radio from the makeshift control room. Power converters are in place. Frequency modulators are stable. We're ready for first power-up. Dr. Miller looked at Morning Light, who nodded slowly. This was the moment of truth. If they succeeded, they had a chance to save the entire fleet. If they failed, she pushed that thought aside. All teams, clear the reactor room, she ordered. Beginning startup sequence in 3 minutes. As the teams retreated to safe positions, Tom caught Dr. Miller's arm. You know what's funny? He said quietly. We're about to power an alien spaceship with what's basically a very fancy steam engine. She smiled despite the tension. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Ready? The countdown began. In the next few minutes, they would discover if human ingenuity could really save an alien civilization. Reactor power at 10%. Bill's voice was steady as he read out the numbers. Inside the scout ship's control room, humans and aliens watched tensely as the fusion reactor slowly came to life. Dr. Miller kept her eyes fixed on the power readings. Beside her, Morning Light monitored his own instruments, his silvery fingers moving quickly over alien controls. The scout ship hummed with a new kind of energy, different from its usual quantum core vibrations. 20%, 30%. Vil continued. Everything looked good until they hit 40% power. That's when the problems started. Warning lights flashed across both human and alien control panels. The ship's frame groaned like it was in pain. Power fluctuation in the main grid. Morning Light called out. The conversion systems are becoming unstable. Tom rushed to a nearby panel, his tools already in hand. The frequencies are out of sync, he shouted. The power's not converting properly between our systems and theirs. Dr. Miller made a quick decision. Hold power at 40%. Don't shut it down yet. She turned to Morning Light. Can you show me your power distribution network again? The alien engineer brought up a holographic display of the ship's power grid. Dr. Miller studied it intently, then her eyes widened. Look at this. Their power doesn't flow like ours. It pulses. We're trying to give them a steady stream when they need bursts. Bill quickly ran some calculations on his tablet. She's right. Their systems are designed for quantum pulses, not continuous power flow. We need to modify the reactor's output pattern. The solar flare warning alarm chose that moment to start blaring. Captain Walker's voice came over the radio. You have 2 hours before we need to evacuate. That flare is picking up speed. Tom was already pulling open an access panel. I can install a power modulator, he said. Make our steady flow pulse like their quantum cores did. But I'll have to build it from scratch. We didn't bring anything like that from Earth. No time. Dr. Miller shook her head. She looked around the room, thinking fast. Her eyes landed on a piece of equipment in the corner, an old Earth oscilloscope they'd brought for testing. Tom, what if we use that oscilloscope's pulse generator? Modify it to handle the power load. Tom stared at her for a moment, then grinned. That's crazy, but it might work. Bill, I need your help with this. The next hour was a blur of activity. Tom and Bill carefully took apart the oscilloscope, using its components to build a makeshift power modulator. They worked fast, their hands steady despite the pressure. Morning Light watched in fascination as the humans turned their testing equipment into a vital power system component. Ready for another try, Tom announced, wiping sweat from his forehead. This should make our reactor pulse power like their quantum cores did. Dr. Miller looked at the countdown clock. They had 45 minutes before the solar flare would force them to evacuate. Take it slow, she ordered. Start at 10% again. The reactor hummed back to life. This time, as the power levels rose, the ship's systems responded differently. The warning lights stayed dark. Morning Light's expression changed to one of surprise as he read his instruments. Power flow matches quantum core patterns almost exactly, he reported. How did you know this would work? We didn't, Dr. Miller admitted. But sometimes you have to trust your instincts and try the unexpected solution. They passed 40% power without any problems. Then 50, 60. At 70%, the ship's main lights came on for the first time since its quantum core failed. The human engineers cheered. Life support systems are online, Morning Light announced, his voice carrying a hint of emotion. Hull integrity fields are functioning. Navigation systems responding. This actually worked. They managed to reach 80% power before the final evacuation warning sounded. It wasn't the full power the quantum cores had provided, but it was more than enough to keep the ship functioning and its crew alive. As they hurried to evacuate before the solar flare hit, Tom grabbed the modified oscilloscope-turned power modulator. We're going to need to make about 300 more of these, he said with a tired smile. Dr. Miller nodded. They had solved one problem, but saving the entire fleet would be an even bigger challenge. Still, they had proved it could be done. Human ingenuity had found a way to adapt Earth technology to save alien lives. The race against time wasn't over, but now they had a real chance of winning it. After the success with the scout ship, The real challenge began. The first colony ship loomed before them, nearly 20 times larger than the test vessel. Its massive hull stretched over a kilometer in length, housing 50,000 sleeping stellar nomads. "This is going to be different," Tom said, looking up at the enormous ship through the space station's window. "We'll need 10 fusion reactors working together just to power life support." Dr. Miller nodded, reviewing the power calculations on her tablet. "And we have to install them without waking the sleeping colonists. One wrong move, and we could kill thousands." The Earth's space agencies had been working around the clock, launching reactor parts and supplies. They'd converted the International Space Station into a manufacturing center, building power modulators based on their modified oscilloscope design. Morning Light approached them with urgent news. "The ship's backup power is failing faster than expected. We have 36 hours before life support systems begin to shut down." Captain Walker called an emergency meeting in the station's main module. Engineers floated around the room, their faces showing exhaustion from weeks of nonstop work. "We can't install the reactors one at a time," Bill explained, pointing to his simulations. "The power surges would be too risky. We need to connect all 10 reactors simultaneously." Tom scratched his head. "That's impossible. We don't have enough people to wire up 10 reactors at once." The room fell silent. Then Robert Wilson, a quiet engineer who had been listening from the corner, spoke up. "What if we don't wire them up? What if we build the whole thing out here first?" Dr. Miller turned to him. "What do you mean?" "Look," Robert pulled up a diagram on the main screen. "We build a complete power plant here at the station. Test it, get it running perfectly. Then we move it into the colony ship as a single unit." Morning Light's eyes widened. The maintenance bay would be large enough. But moving such a massive structure in space— "We can do it," Robert insisted. "We've moved bigger things during station construction. We just need to modify the cargo shuttles to work together." They had no choice. It was their only chance to save the colonists in time. The next 24 hours were a blur of activity. Every available engineer worked on assembling the massive power plant. They built it in sections, testing each part before connecting it to the whole. Tom and Bill worked on synchronizing the reactors, making sure they pulsed in perfect harmony. Dr. Miller and Morning Light designed the connection points where the new power plant would link to the colony ship's systems. As they worked, Robert coordinated with shuttle pilots, planning how to move their creation. They would need 6 shuttles working in perfect coordination to transport the power plant safely. With 12 hours remaining, they were ready for the first test. The complete power plant floated in space near the station, its reactors humming with energy. "Power up sequence starting," Bill announced. "Reactor 1 online. Reactor 2 online." One by one, the fusion reactors came to life. The power modulators pulsed with blue energy, matching the frequency of the alien systems perfectly. "All reactors at 50%, Dr. Miller reported. "Power sync is holding steady." Then something went wrong. Reactor 7 started to fluctuate, its power output becoming erratic. Warning alarms blared through the station. "The magnetic containment field is failing," Tom shouted. "If it goes, it'll take out the whole power plant." Robert pushed off the wall, propelling himself toward the controls. "The field generators are out of alignment. The vibrations from the other reactors must have shaken them loose." With minutes to spare, he made a desperate adjustment. Instead of fighting the vibrations, he synchronized the field generators to pulse with them. The warning alarms suddenly fell silent. "Power levels stabilizing," Bill reported with relief. "All reactors holding steady at 50%. They had done it. The power plant was working, ready to be installed in the colony ship. But they still had to move it into position and connect it, all before the backup power failed. Dr. Miller looked at her tired team. "Good work, everyone. But we're only halfway there. The hard part starts now." The next few hours would determine whether they could save 50,000 sleeping aliens or whether they would witness the greatest tragedy in human history. 6 shuttles moved in perfect formation through space, carrying the massive power plant toward the colony ship. Captain Walker watched from the station's control room, coordinating the delicate operation. "Shuttle team, maintain current speed," he ordered. "We're only going to get one shot at this." Dr. Miller and Tom stood in the colony ship's maintenance bay with morning light, waiting to guide the power plant into position. The backup power indicators on the wall showed less than 3 hours of life support remaining. "All shuttles in final approach," Robert's voice crackled over the radio. He was leading the shuttle team, guiding them through the huge maintenance bay doors. The power plant looked impressive as it entered the bay. 10 fusion reactors connected in a circle, power modulators pulsing with blue energy. It was a perfect blend of human and alien engineering, even if it wasn't pretty. "Beginning final positioning," Robert announced. The shuttles fired their maneuvering thrusters with incredible precision, slowly lowering the power plant onto its mounting points. Suddenly, the ship's lights flickered, backup power failing faster than expected. Morning Light reported, his voice tense. "We have less than an hour." The team moved quickly to connect the power plant to the ship's systems. Tom and Bill worked on one side, Dr. Miller and Morning Light on the other. Their hands flew over the connections, joining human technology to alien power grids. "Primary connections complete," Tom called out. "Ready for power transfer." Dr. Miller looked at Morning Light, who nodded. "Begin power up sequence." The reactors hummed to life one by one, their energy flowing into the alien ship systems. Everyone held their breath, watching the power levels rise. 10%, 20%. Bill counted off. 30%. Warning lights suddenly flashed across the alien control panels. "Power spike in Section 4. Morning Light shouted. "The grid can't handle the load." Dr. Miller rushed to the main control panel. "The ship's power distribution network is more damaged than we thought. It's not spreading the load evenly." Robert, who had just entered from his shuttle, grabbed a tablet and quickly studied the power flow diagrams. "Look at these readings," he pointed. "The power's all trying to flow through one main conduit. We need to split it up." "There's no time to rewire the whole ship," Tom argued. "Then we'll do it the human way," Robert said. He pulled out his tablet and started typing rapidly. "We'll use the reactor control systems to create artificial power paths, like making a river flow through multiple channels instead of one." Morning Light's eyes widened as he understood. "You want to reprogram the reactors to pulse their power output in a rotating sequence." "Exactly," Robert nodded. "Each reactor will power a different section of the ship at slightly different times. No single conduit will ever handle the full load." They quickly implemented Robert's solution, updating the control software for each reactor. The warning lights began to fade. "Power levels rising again," Bill reported. 40%, 50%, 60%. This time, there were no warnings. The ship's systems accepted the power smoothly, coming back to life one by one. "Life support stabilizing," Morning Light announced, relief clear in his voice. "Hull integrity fields at full power. All critical systems responding." The engineering team cheered as the massive ship's main lights came on, illuminating the maintenance bay fully for the first time. Captain Walker's voice came over the radio. "Congratulations, everyone. But remember, we've still got 299 ships to go." Dr. Miller smiled tiredly. "True, but now we know it can be done. And we'll get faster with each one." Morning Light turned to the human engineers. "My people will never forget this. You didn't just save our lives. You showed us a new way of thinking. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one." Tom laughed, holding up his last roll of duct tape. "Wait until we show you what else we can fix with this stuff." Over the next few months, Earth's engineers worked tirelessly to save the entire stellar nomad fleet. They improved their techniques with each ship, teaching the aliens their methods along the way. The stellar nomads would eventually continue their journey, but not before sharing some of their non-critical technology with Earth as thanks. More importantly, they spread word throughout the galaxy about the humans, a young species who solved an impossible problem with ingenuity, determination, and a lot of duct tape. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through advanced technology, but through their unique ability to find simple solutions to complex problems.